Hello, everyone. I'm with Doug Johnson today. He's a pianist and teaches piano at Berklee College of Music and Wellesley College. Thanks for being here, Doug. I appreciate your time and I'm looking forward to the conversation. You were at a body mapping conference recently. How did that go?
It went great. There's this group called it's ABME, or the Association of Body Mapping Educators. And it's this very cool group of people. There are, I think, 120 members, something like that are certified. Most people are college professors somewhere, but they're music teachers, some that teach little kids piano. Yeah. But so a really wide range, and pretty much everybody is a performer and a really good speaker, an excellent teacher. And what we have in common is this commitment, love of moving and understanding about the body better and better, so that can be a foundation for healthy music making. And there's some good analogies. It's kind of like if you thought about making music but never learning that there were these things called chords and stuff like that. It'd be really hard. Yeah. I mean, theoretically, you could just sort of listen and try, but there'd be a lot of guessing, and there'd be a lot of reinventing things that you wouldn't have to reinvent if you learned those basic elements. And if we think about the body, it's really a direct correlate that we're moving and to make sounds, and lots of us have limitations for all sorts of reasons in the way we move that limits what we do on our instrument. And if we learn about the basic elements of our structure, not in like an anatomic class way where you learn the names for the sake of it, but the whole point is just like ear training. You learn about the structures in music and what they sound like, so you recognize those elements and you can generate them. You can sing a major third, or you can recognize a perfect fourth. And the same, if you really start to learn how your shoulder moves and you can get freedom in that, it makes a huge difference. Lots of people lock up or push their shoulder forward and get stuck in these weird positions. Yeah. So that's the group of people, and the conference, it's always an incredible experience when the group comes together. Just such really interesting and interested, curious people. Yeah. I'm really happy to be a very active part of the group, and I was very active. I played, there was an opening concert and I accompanied half the people, and then I did a couple big presentations I've been working on for a long time, so it was really fun.
How did you get into body mapping? Because I'm assuming that, it was sort of out of your syllabus as a professor, you know what I mean? Like you weren't obligated to do it, I guess, but you found this interest and then you kept developing it over the years. How did you get into body mapping? It's like a lot of people that get into a certain sort of practice of a movement practice, like Alexander technique or Feldenkrais. Lots of different things. It comes from getting help at some point for something that you needed help for, and then finding that thing that provided help was something you became interested in. That's definitely was my case. I'll skip part of this because it's just too long, but I was a classical trombone player, and I ended up coming to NEC to get a master's, but I was having issues with the instrument at that point, a thing called a focal dystonia. Focal is Dystonia, if anybody wants to look it up. But there are a lot of musicians that have lost the ability to control a part of their body. It's common for pianists to get it in their right hand. Leon Fleischer, there's some very famous, Gary Graffman, famous examples of great musicians. Flute players, brass players, sometimes it's a hand, and for me it was an embouchure thing. And so I had always played piano, but my technique was really not very good, and I switched to piano and tried to practice extra amounts so I'd make up for switching to piano so late, and then I ended up with another problem, which was pain in my arm, so quote unquote tendonitis. And I finally found help, not from doctors or all sorts of people that thought they might be able to help, but from just a brilliant piano teacher that lived in Connecticut. And the first thing he said was that my thumb, can you hold this for a moment?
Oh, yeah, sure.
That even though the thumb looks to be, let me see a view here, thumb looks to be short. Most people think their thumb is short. Your thumb actually begins right here. And that he said, you know, when you learn that your thumb moves from here and you can make a big circle there versus limited mobility from this short little stubby thumb that we think we have, that I wouldn't hurt anymore. And that was pretty much the case. It was such a direct correlation between trying to move from there instead of realizing that that part of the body really starts there. And that is a perfect example of what this body mapping process is. There's the underlying understanding that we have an internal representation of our bodies, that it's one of those things we don't talk about. It's like when you're a little kid and you hear there's this little dialogue going on in your head all the time. Should I do that or should I, you know? And you think, you just think that's you, and you find out everybody has that, and it's like, wow, that's crazy. And it's a similar thing that we just, and it's an easy thing to access. If I just say your left knee, you cannot help having your mind go to your left knee. And when your mind goes there, you have a sense of obviously where it is, but also that there's movement there, and certain movements happen and certain movements you can't make, can't spin it around, you know, it so-called bends. But there's also this crazy thing called a kneecap, and oftentimes our mind goes to there and think that's kind of the joint, or that's kind of the thing, and that's actually in a really different place than where the joint is. So, but the point right now is just that picture you have when you think about a part of yourself, that's your quote-unquote map. And like the idea that I had before I met my teacher, that my thumb was a short thing, that was my map, and he showed me what it actually was and how it moved. And when I made that change, I mean, this issue I'd had for a while pretty much resolved.
Wow.
And then, but that wasn't the end of it, because then the quest was to really try to learn how to play the piano really well, not just get rid of the pain. And he was, just an extraordinary. Burton Hathaway was his name, and the thumb is an easy one to see, easy one to communicate. Still can be challenging to learn and process. You have to kind of decide to do it. But there are other areas of the body, like this whole shoulder region, the shoulder blade and collarbone and shoulder joint is much more complicated. And he would talk about that, and he would get great improvements in my playing at the lessons down in Fairfield, Connecticut. But I'd come home and I'd have a hard time reproducing it. And so I realized that it seemed like the smart thing to do. I realized that I should really learn about those structures, and that's what set me down this path. And I became a registered nurse along the way, and so I had that background. That was kind of a separate thing. But so I mean, I had some anatomical and scientific kind of background, but also, you know, anatomy books, and I ended up getting a full-size skeleton to study and learn the stuff. And I was doing this before I found out there was this group, this Association of Body Mapping Educators. And so when I found them, these are my people. Like I'm not alone in my obsessive study, and it's honestly just been endlessly rewarding. Everything I learn has helped me be more grounded physically, emotionally, mentally, and just be able to be more efficient at the instrument. And every one of those things is helpful teaching. And Burton saved me from those issues I was going through, because I might not have been able to continue to play. It was that bad. And it's been a great blessing for me to be able to pass that on. There's been a lot of people that, and not just pianists, bass players, string players, guitar players that have, clarinet player, that have come to me with issues that they thought they might have to stop playing, and using these tools, been able to, the issues are basically dealt with, which is, it's incredibly satisfying, and I truly have empathy for what they're going through, because I went through such a similar thing.
Cool. That's really nice to hear. Do you think most students who enter music college, do you think they proactively think about some of these issues? To give you an example, if you were walking in the hallways in 1140, and if you were to pass by some of the piano rooms, and if you saw some students waiting outside, I bet it's more likely that the conversation would be about cool chords or like cool rhythms and things like that, and not so much piano technique. I feel like students tend to be a little reluctant about dealing with technical issues unless they have some kind of issue or underlying pain. Would you say that's been your experience in meeting new students?
Yes. I could expand, but absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, most people want to, let's put it in the context of people that are really here to play, because I mean, there are people that have to take lessons for other majors and all those kinds of things, but assuming people really want to play, they love music and they want to play, and they want to get better fast, usually, and they hear somebody down the hall that's doing something that they can't do, and or they can't do yet, and they just want to get there. Yeah, and an interesting kind of side question is you use the word technique a couple times. I mean, that word has different meanings to different people. I mean, there's the sort of the higher, faster, louder.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, I figured. I mean, that it's often the case, right? But obviously, technique is broader than that, right? There, on the one hand, it's the ability to produce the sound that you're picturing, not just an individual sound, but a gesture, a group of notes, and all those things, and control the tone color and the dynamics and the articulation, and time is certainly an element of technique. But then there are also aspects of sustainability. Musicians, it's a fascinating contrast between athletes and musicians. It's kind of a popular, or was a popular thing in some circles to talk about, say, musicians are athletes. And yes, no. I mean, there's a very obvious healthy connection there. Yeah. So especially like guitar players, they just kind of think they move their fingers and stuff. And the idea that, whereas a singer, they know their whole body is their instrument and they have to take care of themselves. So the idea that if we get enough sleep and we're generally in good shape and we have good nutrition and we just take care of ourselves in a general way, that as an athlete has to do that, and that's going to be helpful for us. The idea that we use our whole body is an actor knows that, a singer knows that, but sometimes other musicians don't have a sense of that. So there's really helpful ways that's helpful. It occurred to me at one point, though, there's some ways that some things that are hugely different. Professional athletes are done pretty early in their lives. Right? I mean, when you have somebody like Roger Federer, did he go to 40 or something, or 38 or 39? And that was freakish. But I mean, I wonder how many people he has working for him. There's somebody giving him massages and nutritionists and trainers of this and trainers of that, and but it took all those people and that amazing work ethic and talent, all that, to get that far. But you go to see the BSO, and you see these violinists in their late 60s or 70s, and and Rubinstein playing when he was 80, and Horowitz and stuff. And they're not playing easy pieces. They're still playing Rachmaninoff at those ages and things. So there's something fundamentally different that what athletes do, it tends to be maximum endurance, lift the most, run the fastest, and our ability to absolutely max out definitely diminishes over time. But a great instrumentalist distributes the work to produce the sounds over their entire body with great efficiency. And that gets to another kind of aspect of technique. When you learn how to do something with the least work and balance that reluctant to use the word work even, but the energy required over the entire body, that's what can allow you to play really, really big challenging pieces with a big dynamic range and the velocity, and sustain that into your 70s and 80s. It's a really extraordinary thing.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up athletes because one of my hobbies is to look at videos about sport and exercise science. And I really enjoy just learning about how you can use science to really improve your performance. I find that, at least in my experience, that's not always been the case in music education. And I feel like sometimes things are very intuitive, and people just say, oh, just feel it, and things like that. And also, in terms of technical matters, I feel like there's a certain lack of standardization, if that makes sense. Like if you think of jazz harmony, there's very little disagreement about what tensions you can put over C major 7 in the key of G or something like that. It's very clear cut and obvious. But if you ask like 50 different piano professors a technical question, they can come up with very widely differing opinions and things like this. So I wonder, do you have any thoughts about this? Yeah, maybe I'll just say lack of consistency or lack of agreement when it comes to technique and those kinds of issues in music pedagogy.
Oh, 100%. I mean, there are absolutes. I really think some people, just the thought of what I just said would really offend some people I know. I've heard some people say, everybody's hand is different. Everybody needs to find their own technique. While on the one hand,
pun intended.
Yes, everybody's hand's different, but on the other hand, that's a ridiculous thing to say. There's the same amount of bones. There's the same joints. If a hand surgeon needs to do some work in your hand, he doesn't go in, or she doesn't go in and go, who the hell knows what I'm going to find in there? Every hand's different. There are little creatures running around. I've never seen that before. I mean, it's, of course, the same essential structures are there. They're proportioned differently. If somebody says everybody's hand is proportioned differently, and the piano is the same size, and that can be a challenge, I'm 100% with you. But to say everybody's hand is different, it's not, there's not great utility in that. It's kind of makes the things hopeless. It's like, well, hell if I know how you're going to play the piano. Your hand's different than mine. That doesn't give you great utility. I'm really, really interested in actionable things. What information is going to be useful and helpful? And everybody's hand's different. That doesn't do it. Yeah. This joint at the base of the thumb, you can make a circle from there. Everybody can. Yeah. And if you know that, that's functional. You can go from there we go. You can go from a unison to an octave with your thumb. That's crazy. Most people, if they move a whole step, they're going to push their hand. So if your hand's smaller or larger, that there's no difference there. So in terms of standardization, we can. It isn't so much. That sounds a little bit like an imposition on something. And I'm not saying that's what you meant, but as I say it, it sounds a little funny. The first thing is recognizing what is knowable. And the structure of the body and the way the body moves and its different elements and collectively is absolutely knowable, and it's perceivable. That's an actionable aspect. If it's, I know how my kidney works, but I can't feel it. And if I could feel it, I don't know how helpful that would be. But I know how my thumb works, and I can feel it. I can feel the movement of that saddle joint there. I can feel when I push my shoulder forward to reach for something, and then I'm going to get stuck in an awkward position. A lot of people are there. I can also feel what happens when that shoulder, the head of the humerus spins, and then my arm becomes free. And if I was a conductor, that would communicate music much better than if I push my shoulder forward and locked. Right. Another way that these kind of things come up is using vague terms, which are very popular. Like, I'll give you three: relax, sing, and flow. Sound familiar? Yeah. Just relax and sing, relax and sing. Now, yeah, it might help, but the problem is it might not get you all the way to the place you want to get. So most anybody is going to hit some sort of barrier by relaxing and singing. And at some point, they're likely going to try to relax so much that they've collapsed, and then they're doing some other movement to compensate for the collapse out here. Happens a lot. Tight necks from collapsed wrists and hands. So once again, those terms they're so vague that they're not actionable, and they often create undesired results. A term in the body mapping class, we spend a lot of time talking about language like that. A term a term I like is supple. If you're free as well. I mean, a lot of people hold tension in their wrist. There's issues of where the wrist is, and that there are 8 bones in that area, and how those parts move, that you can study a little bit and palpate your wrist and learn. But the fact that people lock their wrist is a real issue. If I try to relax over and again, it tends to create collapse. But supple and free don't usually imply collapse, and that's always a good thing. Another word that I find is to be super useful is springiness. Springy. I've never ever had anybody come for help and say, I'm too springy. Can you help me? I'm bouncing off the walls, hitting the ceiling, too springy. Springiness is always good. And the thing is, if we're springy, we can't have something locked. If your knees are locked, you're not springy. If your ankles are locked, your hip joints are locked. If your spine is locked, if your ribs are locked, if your wrist is locked, there's no springiness. We're designed to have every part be springy and resilient and move as part of the whole. Another thing is, we're globally a spring. You see somebody, Wimbledon's going on right now, see somebody preparing to return serve, they're springing back there, and they're ready to, they're really loading that spring so they can explode in some direction. And I mean, intuitively know this. When you see little kids, they're springy. We used to be springy. Yeah. Everybody used to be springy. And so one of the things, if you just pick up a spring, it has one level of tension. If you take a pen apart, there's a little spring in there. If you take a car apart, there's a different kind of spring that has a lot, it's heavier, thicker, and it's under much greater tension. And living things, cats, dogs, monkeys, people, we can constantly retension our spring, our global spring for the task at hand. If you're walking, there's a certain amount of springiness you need. If you step down the curb, It's a really big that's a really big change in how the spring needs to be tighter. We do it very automatically, except for a lot of us if you lock your ribs and your spine's locked, and when you step down the curb, you're going to get an impact through your body. But if there's suppleness through here, then that natural springiness is going to absorb that impact. And I mean, all sorts of ways that's the case. If you're a cellist or you're a bass player, the amount of the kind of tension in the spring is going to be different for those activities. Another aspect is tension, words that people avoid. Tension. Tension is bad. Like, springs have tension. No tension with no springs without tension. No sound without tension. And I think it's really important to bring back words that that do have such great utility. But because when people say tension is bad, what they're talking about is locking. And that's not a tension. Tension is resilient. Tension is what's in a spring or a drum head or a violin bow, and a rubber band. Locking is something we want to get rid of. Right. That's the enemy of springiness and tension. So I guess I went off on a tangent there.
Well, no, it's all good. Tying this back to the question about athletes and sports science, like you mentioned, an athlete might have a whole team of people working with the athlete to improve their performance and just sustainability, things like this. And overall, there's a lot of maybe scientific rigor that goes behind understanding all of those methodologies. I mean, there's so many studies about, say, muscle hypertrophy, which is just, like building as much muscle as you can. And people tend to have...
And then you see the rock climbers that aren't all buff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like...
And they can hold themselves with one finger. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Do you think the music world will see something like this at some point? Because at the moment, it doesn't seem like not everyone wants to talk about these things. Maybe some professionals and professors included. Do you see that changing at some point?
No. I'm a little optimistic. There's been some people that have done some work. I actually had a research grant at one point, and I got into that world a little bit, and there's always the potential there. One challenge is basically the way that people teach, and very reasonably, is they do the best they can playing their instrument. They do the best they can figuring out what they do, and they do the best they can to communicate that to their students. It's all good stuff. And they also, of course, we all do this. We take what we learned, good and bad, from our own experience as students, and communicate the good stuff. Some of the best stuff I learned from a teacher was how not to teach, because it was just a lot of things that was unfortunate. But it was really helpful, because that really happens with parenting too. I'm going to do these things, and I'm not going to do these things, right? So, but in that process, there's so much information, so many words, and in the very sincere, best intentioned way that muddle up this process. When people talk about weight is a huge one. This is probably the most controversial. It gets people a little crazy. You play with weights. You play with weights, which is just collapsing and dropping. There's not much in life that we do that the best thing to do is just totally take part of your body and just let it be a projectile. And if you look at the physics of it, the active issue is, or the important issue we'll just rewind slightly. What we're looking at really is the energy of something that's moving, right? All the time. You have a bat, and you accelerate that bat, so the velocity is greater, and assuming you hit the ball, you have the mass of the bat and the velocity of the bat. And if you can create greater bat speed, we know that that bat has a greater kinetic energy, so there's a greater force, and the ball is going to go further. So high school batting coaches talk about bat speed. And if you pick up a golf magazine, they talk about club head speed. They don't talk about weight. They don't talk about dropping the bat. It's accelerating it, right? So that's, for most musicians, that's what we're really dealing with, is how to create and control velocity, and how do we control how much mass is involved. So I can move my finger, I can move from my elbow, I can move from my whole shoulder, and there's a lot more mass in my whole arm and into my shoulder blade than there is in just my finger. So how much that key is going to accelerate, and so if I do this and this and this, the dynamic range is all I'll ever need, and I'm never collapsing. I'm never dropping my arm into the keys. I can make a sound that way, but it's only one sound.
Right.
It's only one acceleration. So the reason that the weight creates the sound is it accelerates the mass in one acceleration, but I can control the velocity of my arm, and I can control how much of my arm is moving. That's high school physics. That's not MIT physics. That's high school physics. And a great challenge is when people learn how to not lock parts and move more mass and free that mass to move, they call it
Weight.
Yes. And they say it's gravity. And pianists are so invested in that, in their lineage and their teachers, what their teacher said and what they're saying. And they might be able to do the thing beautifully, and then they call it weight. And if you try to tell them, if you try to have the discussion, I've had so many, I remember this one discussion with this one very challenging human being that said, I'll say she, which is true. She said, and this is somebody who does research, claims to do research, be a great expert at this. She says, well, to me, weight is,
Okay.
and I said, no, you can't do that with weights. You can't do that with mass. You can't do that with velocity. You can say, to me, the interpretation of this phrase should be this. I think that note is the peak of the phrase. It's like, okay. And to me, it's here, and we can both have those opinions. But when it comes to elements of basic physics,
Right.
like you can't say the wrist is a simple hinge. If there are 8 bones in there, it's a complicated thing. There's all sorts of things about anatomy that are undeniable. The problem is we can't see it, and that's a great challenge. So people's confusion there relates often to that. But my God, that issue, in particular with pianists, it's much easier to talk about these things often with other instrumentalists, and I feel like that's the challenge. I mean, I know it's a challenge because I've had these discussions, and people get really, if something's working for them, I get that. When something's working for them, and then you say, well, it's actually different than that. They didn't necessarily come to you to have their world overturned. and if it's working even if it could be working better, it very likely could work better if they have a more accurate understanding. But if it's working for them and they have other things in their life they're concerned about, and writing 5 new pieces for their new CD, or it's a tough one. So those things are important to get out in understanding how the piano works, and we could talk about how actually the piano itself works related to this. But in terms of making any sort of standardized change to the understanding would involve educating a lot of people that don't want to be, I shouldn't say, I don't want to, I don't say they don't want to be educated. Everybody wants to be educated, but they have, there's no reason that they have any motivation to spend time learning that stuff. It's like all the different kind of trainings you have to do as a faculty member, and you have to sign off. Like, most people don't want to go to those classes. Yeah, so that's and it's something I'm really invested in, and I'd really like to. I mean, your question, this is something I'm really invested in. I think it would be incredibly helpful if basic. It would be like if everybody called a secondary dominant a different name. Even if they agreed what it is, that would be crazy. That wouldn't be helpful. And but if some people deny they existed and other people thought they, I mean, it's just it's a tough challenge. But the potential for so improvement in so many things if people had these basic elements as part of their understanding, it would be profound.